Hi everybody and welcome to Monday, and I'm going to share you probably the most unusual cooking video that you ever have seen. It comes from the Paraffin stove from the Netherlands. I hope you stay tuned. Everybody and welcome to my channel. Can you give me that thumbs up and can you make sure you're subscribed? Now let's get started in the video. Welcome back everyone. I'm going to combine a very old-fashioned Dutch recipe that my mother used to make that's exclusive for PA Dutch. We're making chicken pot pie, and it's a little bit of a different recipe because it calls for slippery noodles. What is slippery noodles? Well, I hope you keep watching to find out. But I'm going to showcase a way of cooking that comes from the Netherlands. It is using a paraffin stove. I'm going to show you in detail what is a paraffin stove. It is 100% off-grid, and I'll share with you how we make our food. So let's get started in the recipe first, and then I'll show you how we're going to cook it. You can see this is the stove, but we're not going to focus on that right now. We're going to focus on what we're making today. We're going to make some chicken pot pie. So what I have already is some chicken and some celery, and I have some chicken broth, and we're going to put that into our kettle. That I combined together in the Instapot. Go ahead and add some of my home canned chicken. Everybody wants to know, what do you use your food for in your pantry? Most of my videos I incorporate my home canned and my dried food, and this is some of the canned chicken. And then I had one can left from the food pantry. We're going to use this to use it up. And that is chicken broth. Then we have lots of my own home canned chicken broth. We're going to add that as well. I'm going to go ahead and get one more quart of chicken broth, and then that should be plenty. Add another quart. And I'm going to add another quart because I'm making a large amount of this. Because when you take all the time and effort into making this, I make a large amount for my children. So what it is, it's chicken, and it's some celery, and some peppers, and some chicken broth. And now we're going to add some potatoes. So we're going to cut up our potatoes, and we're going to cut them up in maybe fourths or eighths. This is a high starch carbohydrate type of meal. This is what we call comfort food, and this is a staple in the Pennsylvania Dutch tradition. Notice I am not using a cutting board. My mama would never have used a cutting board. This is something I have never used. I will use it when I'm cutting up meat and things like that, but a cutting board is something I don't use. Oftentimes Theo in the Netherlands will tell me I cook a lot like what he was used to. And he said that he thinks it's probably my Dutch ancestry. You know, it's just the way I was taught and raised, the way my mama was taught and raised. My grandma did things like this. It may be a haphazard type of way of cooking to the new generation of people who everything has to be proper, but this is how we cooked. Alright, now we have everything but the noodles. But now we're going to go ahead and we're going to heat our stove. It's quite ironic. Behind me I have a state-of-the-art dehydrator and air fryer, and here I have something that's actually extremely difficult to find. When Theo found this for me and sent it the whole way from the Netherlands, this was something that it took him a while to find, and he wanted me to have this, and I have a hard time using it because I just treasure it so much. So here is a little bit of a window where you can actually see, the flame. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, we're going to lift this up, and this is how I'm doing it. I'm not sure if this is the proper way, but this is how I'm doing it. So this here is just like an oil lamp. It's just like an oil lantern. We're going to go ahead way down. This one here. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Now we're going to turn it way. There you go. This is it's so much fun. I've been using this quite a while now. So I'm adjusting the flame. And this is like a slow cooker. So what is heating? What am I using? So what am I using? I'm using the clean heat. This is the same as in my oil lamps, clean heat. And that's what I'm using. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start cooking this while we make our noodles. How cool is that? So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our pot pie. Now, pot pie is a lot like pie crust, but it's cut different. So let me show you how we're going to do it. It is 3 tablespoons of shortening, 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, and 1/4 to 1/2 cup of milk. So as you see, this pot pie is more of a richer flavor than it would be if you would just be making a pie crust. So I'm going to be using my bacon fat, and I'm going to be using some butter in the place of the shortening. We have 2 cups of flour, and it's unsifted. I really don't sift my flour, but some people do. But it calls for it to be unsifted. So it's 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, and then 1/4 to 1/2 cup of milk, and 3 tablespoons of shortening. So if I have enough of the bacon grease, I will use that. It's going to be close to having 3 tablespoons of it, but we shall see. And no, your food does not have any bacon taste to it. You don't taste any bacon when you are making pie dough with bacon fat, or if you're making noodles. There is no taste of bacon in that. Great, so that was enough. It worked out perfect. Now we're going to add an egg and then our milk to it. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use our pastry blender, and we're going to blend it all together before we add the wet ingredients. You always do that. You always put this first and then you add the wet ingredients. So we're going to crumble this up. And you notice I use my hands a lot. That's just how I was born and raised. My mom was a very good cook. My mother knew how to bake. My mother knew how to cook fabulous meals, but they were potatoes and meat kind of meals. We didn't eat casseroles. We ate very little of that kind of thing. We had no food that was international. All of our food was Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. That's how my daddy liked it, and that's how we always ate. Everything was like this. My mother cooked everything from scratch. My mother did not buy anything prepackaged. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add 1 egg and the milk. I'm going to go with 1/2 cup here, and we add it as we need it. So we give it a stir with our wooden spoon until we get it incorporated, and then we use our hands. These things. And one thing nice about Pennsylvania Dutch cooking, it's ingredients that everybody has. It's just plain down, plain cooking. Now I added a half a cup. It all depends on the humidity of your home. It depends on lots of things. Sometimes in a recipe you will need more wet or more dry ingredients. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to work the dough. So working the dough is basically working the dough. We're going to go ahead and just keep kneading it until it's incorporated. Like I told you in my pie recipe, you don't knead it like it's bread. The smallest amount of time that you spend on it, the best. And make sure your ingredients are always very cold. Now, a lot of times people have a problem is because their ingredients are not cold. As you see in the background, it's cooking on the paraffin stove. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more milk because there's a little bit of flour yet that needs to be incorporated. And I like to use everything up. I don't like to have things wasted. And I'll show you in a minute. It's hard to show you. Working with pie dough and working with dough is nothing to fear. It becomes a habit and a knack if you do it long enough. I know a lot of people have problems with dough. And see, I'm not working with the whole dough at one time. I'm only working with half of it at one time. Working with all of it, it makes it harder. So there's our dough. I'm going to wash my hands and then I'll show you how we make it into pie dough. How we make it into pot pie noodles. We're going to go ahead and flour our rolling pin. Somebody said about not washing your rolling pin, and that is true. You really aren't supposed to wash your rolling pin. Now, of course, every once in a while, you almost have to. But that is true. So, do we want our pot pie noodles to be thin and light, or do we want to have them thicker and puffy? Well, I love the thicker the pot pie the noodles. I love having that taste. But look how beautiful this is. You can actually use this as a pie crust. It's absolutely easy to do. And it's a rich crust or a rich noodle. So now what we do is we're going to take our handy dandy cutter and we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut our noodles. Now, pot pie noodles are in squares. So we go in squares with our noodles. All the memories. My mom used to lay the noodles out on the table until she was ready to cook them. And I remember all of that. There was times in my mother's life where she suffered deep depression. And then there was times in my mother's life when she was extremely productive in her life and she really just embraced life. And so I always try to focus on those parts of my mom's life. If you've seen yesterday's video, it was a very hard video for me to make. The hardest video I ever made, and I will not ever be talking about that again, but I wanted to share a part of my life with you all. And so that was a painful part of my life, but it was a part of my life that has such great blessings as well, because through my life story, other people can know that they're not alone. And so while I hold the happiness and the traditions that I was raised with, I focus on them and I focus on positivity in my life. So there are some of the noodles. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the rest. So this is a very, it's more like a stew. It's going to get very thick with these noodles. And we only add these noodles until when the soup is finished. When the soup is finished and it's boiling is when we add the noodles. And when the noodles are done, you will know it because they will float to the top. And so you don't put these noodles in now, and you surely don't ever put the noodles in before your broth is boiling really good. So we want our potatoes to be soft, and we want our potatoes and everything to be boiling hot before we add our noodles. And you can always add your noodles. You can always make your noodles ahead of time. Now these noodles are a little thicker because I like the thickness of them. And this is called slippery pot pie. I'm not sure why it calls that. That's just the Pennsylvania Dutch name for it. I am looking on a book, and it is a very old book that's been in my family for a long, long time. And I'm going to share with you the book. It is called, and this book was written by my relatives, my bloodline. This is a relative of mine. It is called The Art of Pennsylvania Dutch Cooking, and this is by Edna E.B. Heller. And the last name Heller was actually my middle name before I was adopted. And this is my bloodline. So it is The Art of Pennsylvania Dutch Cooking by Edna E.B. Heller. And that is where this recipe and many others are based on. So I'm going to show you how I add the noodles. This is a little bit difficult for me because it's so high. So we're going to go ahead and add all the noodles into the boiling pot. The potatoes are already finished. Everything is finished. So this is how we add it, and we want to really keep this boiling. So we want to keep this boiling. We're going to turn up the flame. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add all these, and then I'll show you what they look like when everything is finished. I'll get back to you in just a moment. Everybody, here is my chicken pot pie, an old-fashioned recipe that was cooked on an old-fashioned stove that came the whole way from the Netherlands by Theo. And he gave it to me for Christmas, and he'd been searching a long time for one. And I've been working with it and cooking with it, and it brings back just a little bit of tradition and my ancestors. Chicken pot pie. So here you go. It's the homemade noodles, and when they're finished, they float to the top. And we have potatoes and chicken and celery and broth. How much better can it get than that? And let me show you. Now this isn't the kind of cooking that's going to help you lose weight, but this is the kind of cooking that will give you traditions and will be comfort food, and everybody loves it. A lot of people ask that I never add seasonings when I cook. Well, I have my seasonings right here. Mama didn't really use a whole lot of seasonings. We had it at the table. And this here is my salt that is smoked. So this is smoked salt. This is the actual real salt that has all of the minerals and vitamins in them. And I'll give you a link to it from Amazon in the description box. And then we just add a little bit of pepper. In Pennsylvania Dutch, we really didn't add a whole lot of different seasonings in our cooking. It was salt and pepper and a little bit of saffron we would use once in a while. Basically, it's just home down cooking from the northern part of the United States. Pennsylvania Dutch style, that is. Take care, everyone. We'll see you guys tomorrow. And I hope you give this a try. It's so simple and easy, and I know that your family will enjoy it. I've never heard of anybody not liking chicken pot pie. If you don't like chicken, you can substitute it for ham and make it ham pot pie. That was perfect. Did you miss Mom's Pennsylvania Dutch pie apple dumpling recipe and pie crust recipe? I have that video below, and there's many more videos I think you may have missed. And don't forget, once again, to subscribe.